So who here remembers the old cartoon? It was called Peanuts, I think, and it was in like all the papers every Saturday. And there was one character who, I don't know if it was Linus or somebody. He walked around continually with, he had a like a storm cloud over his head all the time. I forget his name. You can let me know in the comments. I think Linus was the one who had like a blanket. Anyway, um, I wanted to bring through a couple of intuitions, and this is one of the images that came up to illustrate one of them, which is that guy with the little storm cloud over his head, like wherever he walked, it would be raining, right? This came up intuitively for me last night because it's the perfect illustration of what it means to be living within our projections. Now, projection is such a tricky concept because there's several levels to it, right? Several ways it actually works, and we tend to kind of cognize it as like, you're projecting, meaning like there's a sense in which you're kind of like throwing something, um, or the sense in which you're kind of like viewing something on a screen. For example, like there's a projector, right? And that's projecting images. And but it's basically like this storm cloud image that I intuited last night. It's trying to illustrate this other aspect, which is just like how palpable the projections are. In a sense, they're kind of like a network of our beliefs, and so we can really live inside that so densely, like the proverbial fish in water, that we don't realize what we're so called projecting. It's not necessarily or always like an active thing. It's definitely not always conscious. It's, I would argue, though, from a philosophical point of view, from a philosophy of perception point of view, projection is always happening. So there's nothing like wrong, like if you're projecting, because our minds literally are projecting some degree, some schema in order to be able to cognize a world at all. So the issue is really just like becoming conscious of the types of assignments and projections you are making. These are called, you can also consider them perceptual judgments, but they also link up with our beliefs. And certain beliefs are just so hardwired and they can be so unconscious that it really is like walking around with the storm cloud over our head, or pick any weather you want, but it's the weather kind of like around your head all the time, and you can really become kind of like inured to that. And it takes like extra consciousness and awareness to really like think about that, to think about like, maybe this is just like the cloud that follows my head all the time. Like maybe these aren't actual, like, I'm not getting into illusionism. Like, don't get me started on the concept of illusion. It's just a bad category at this point. It's no longer helpful. That's a side topic, but the point is that projection is kind of like our mental baggage, right? Like we all have a mental suitcase, or you can call it a literal mental projector. We need this in order to have an experience in the world at all. So it's just about becoming aware of like the kind of projector you have and the kinds of images you create, the kinds of metaphors you use, what archetypes are you working with, and so on. And so here's the main intuition that I really got last night. It was really clear, and that is that this issue of projection, it's kind of really linked to the way we talk about separation consciousness, right? Because, and here again, I'm going to call back on the classical philosophy of perception, because for perception, which is different from consciousness, remember, I've talked about this, perception will always have an object, right? We are a subject perceiving an object of some sense, whether it's mainly or only a mental object, or whether we're perceiving an object outside of ourselves. But so perception in that sense is always already about separation, about projection, because you're always projecting, or you can see this also as constructing an object. So, a huge question that comes up a lot in like consciousness studies and in the philosophy of perception is, whether and how we can get away from this. Can we ever move out of this duality of consciousness? And yes, there are non-dual states of consciousness. There are non-symbolic states of consciousness. As I said, consciousness is distinct from perception. It's much larger, it's much more foundational. It can take on many other presentations. So, perception is a very, very specific kind of modulation of consciousness, is how I would put it. Okay, I'm going to try to get this inside out really quickly so I don't get lost in language here, and then I'll just circle back and kind of like flesh it out a bit. But my insight is that, and this might sound obvious, but this is going back to my theory of the orbital self. And basically, you need to sync up with your highest timeline, which means that you need to kind of get up to speed with your own truth. Like if you can get up to speed with your own truth, if you can live at the speed of your own reception of light, then you won't be lost in projection, meaning your consciousness will take on a quality of immanence to it. You will have a very direct relationship with yourself rather than with objects of thought or with perceptions of the world or perceptions of others and relations between yourself and others. And so what was coming through really clearly for me was just the extent to which the more that we can take on that kind of like step into that embodied immanent type of experience, again, the more in sync we are with the unfolding of our own truth and our own light, and we won't see things as projections in the world. And for example, you may end up projecting your own really good qualities, your own golden shadow, so to speak, onto, you may end up finding it in the world, in other people, if you are not up to the speed of your own, I want to say timeline, that's not quite what I mean, your own unfolding, your own thread. Because if you think of like two kinds of like ball bearings or something, and they're like working in an orbit, they're in a kind of like centrifugal pattern, and one of them is maybe larger or more dense, and it's like gonna go ahead of the other one. If you're out of sync with your own energy like that, you're gonna see yourself in the world. You're gonna see yourself in other people or relationships, or it's gonna happen as an event outside of you rather than for you. So this is really esoteric, but it just came through so clearly for me last night. You have to be able to keep up with your own timeline, your own thread of truth, I guess, which is like a specific process of unfolding. And so this goes back to a couple videos ago that I did on how long a given experience may take. Depends on your ability to receive your own truth and process your own truth and anchor your own truth, anchor your own light codes, so to speak, and to really embody that, to develop this immanence of consciousness. Because if you don't, you're going to be trailing behind that in a very real sense. And that's when you begin to, you'll meet your like perfect partner, but they'll be with someone else, or it'll be like the job that you should have had, but it was given to someone else who actually wasn't even interested or wasn't even qualified, and just be like, what kind of timeline am I on, right? This is how it happens. So you guys, the point here is that you need to practice receiving your own light, receiving your own truth, and acting on it, embodying it. So as soon as you get knowledge, as soon as you get intuition, you need to act on it. You need to somehow ground it, to anchor it. And what that means is, at minimum, I've mentioned this before too, but at minimum, you want to like anchor that in on at least a symbolic level, which is not nothing, because that sets off its own chain, its own energetic anchoring. And so if that's all you can do is something on the symbolic level, then do that. You can make a drawing. You can, writing it into your calendar, writing out the steps that you would need for it. Maybe it comes through as a poem. So all of this counts. This is why processes like journaling are a lot more important than we realize or often speak about, because journaling is really a form of anchoring. You're anchoring light codes. You are channeling yourself. You're channeling your higher self. You're channeling many other parts of yourself when you journal. So, journaling is an extremely important spiritual practice. Having a heart to heart, really intimate conversation with someone is also in this category. You're literally channeling yourself again. You're anchoring aspects of your higher knowing, your higher timeline. So that also counts. It's not small talk, it's like a real heart to heart conversation with whomever you can have that with. Attending some lectures can do this too, whether maybe it's, like a priest you listen to or some other figure. It could be a professor. You can absolutely attain higher states of your own consciousness in really good lectures, like the ones that you have some kind of relationship to the topic. It's already part of a path of unfolding that you're on, and then you can develop it, you can take it higher from there. So don't overlook that also. And what this all comes down to is being in dialogue with your higher self, such that you're anchoring right away, like you're taking action right away. So if you get that idea, if you're getting a really strong pull of like, oh my God, I need that book, go get it. Go start reading it. Do something right away as soon as you can. Make it real, because the closer you live to the level of action, you will not be spending time in projection, which again, that just means perception really at this point. All perception is really a projection. It's a construction. These are quite interchangeable. Like there is no pure perception that isn't going to have some kind of like cognitive overlay and cognitive schema that it's coming through. Again, we can go back to that metaphor of surfing that I used a few videos ago, because in surfing, if you've ever done this, but we can imagine, right? You are not, you're so embodied. You are so living moment to moment and in this complete embodied form of presence. That's immanence. That's immanent consciousness. You are not, you're not hosting perceptions per se. Everything is immediately translated into action, into, balancing, into your sense of direction, into the sense of like the weight, positioning of your body, the temperature, everything, right? You get the point. And it's in those kinds of states where we can connect with these non dual registers, where many aspects of who we are, or many aspects of our field, are still in superposition and can still like bring in other aspects where we haven't like so-called collapsed any of our own waves yet. But this isn't to say, like, I'm not trying to say things like, don't think like everything else is thinking, like you're either thinking or you're doing. It's not like a polarity like that, because if your purpose is a writer, like obviously, or songwriting, or like screenwriting or something, you're using language, you're thinking, like you're working with perceptions and images. So that is its own form of action too sometimes. So you have to just be like really discerning. It's more about like your own purpose, the work that you're meant to do. Are you embodying that? Are you like acting within your purpose, taking the next steps that you're receiving about your purpose? And that's how you stay embodied, whether you're working with music, coding, whatever. But I'm telling you, this is all about the coherence of your own frequency. And if you can maintain that coherence and drive it up, that's what you want to do. And then you won't be mediated by as many projections. You will just be like translating right into action, an immediate translation of your own light codes. Because if you lose this cycle of action with yourself and with your higher awareness, you will start to see like versions of yourself kind of like running off on their own, and you'll find them in other people, in other people's lives. Or they're going to show up as like, the so-called doppelgangers, like someone who looks like exactly like, that person you dated. So let me know if this resonates, if you've experienced any of this yourself. I know it can seem really abstract, but I am like so certain, like it came through so clearly last night. I've done my best to kind of lay it out here, and it's definitely connecting with like what I've been talking about over the last like month, 2 months. You have to stay up to speed with yourself. You have to stay in sync with your higher awareness. And that means taking action. You do this through action. That's literally also how you will bring in your higher awareness. If you feel, you're stuck because, well, I don't know what my higher awareness is. I don't know what my higher self is saying. You have to kind of like get into that game of double dutch. You have to like skip. You have to dance. You have to like take the steps. And then it starts coming through. And again, I'm not trying to oppose action to thinking or something like that, because action is just one form that this could take. For example, it may also be about like claiming your reality by speaking it into existence, by stating your feelings, sharing your experience. This is also a form of action, right? Technically, speaking language, it's not opposed to action, it is literally its own practice. And so I think that's why, like, writing down your so called affirmations, writing down what you manifest is a powerful practice, because it's really another way of claiming your awareness. When you're writing down, I live in this kind of house in this kind of city or town in the area that I like with my partner who has these qualities. What you're doing is claiming your awareness. You're claiming your higher awareness. You're putting it into existence. You're actualizing it by making yourself aware of your awareness. So I hope this helps someone. I hope it's given you some insights. If you happen to be in a place where you're just feeling really kind of detached from your life or stuck, or you can kind of resonate with the picture that I painted, I would suggest doing like a simple exercise, or maybe with writing if you like writing, or drawing if you can just like sketch something, and to just like draw out as much as you know that you desire. Like draw it out, write it out. It doesn't have to be like these super tidy affirmation statements. You can just like describe it. You can use bullet points. Again, this is just about working with it on this symbolic level, so that again you're claiming your awareness. At the most, you are like bringing your awareness into reality, and that is a form of action. Basically, that is a form of like spiritual action, most directly. So let me know how this goes, you guys. I've seen it again and again in my own life, and I think I just finally have the schema for like how it's actually working. So let me know if you have any questions about what I sketched out. I took what is really basically a phenomenological approach to this. It's kind of a phenomenological and psychosynthetic type of way of describing this. So it's not an attempt at making some kind of like metaphysical framework that like holds through across all contexts, but this is absolutely a coherent phenomenological framework that will resonate with a great many of you. You'll see what I mean.